Today marks a significant milestone for the supply chain industry. President Cyril Ramaphosa has officially signed the much-anticipated Procurement Bill into law. The law mandates that a significant portion of government procurement contracts be awarded to historically disadvantaged individuals and small, medium and micro enterprises. I caught up with CEO of Supply Chain Counsel, Kamogelo Mampane.
Regulatory framework that collapses any other thing that we've ever known in the past that used to talk about procurement. So now we have one legislative framework that talks about procurement and that drives, that should be driving procurement in the country. So in the past, we had a lot of other regulations, and we can remember in the past, the act that we had at the time was the Act of 2000, the Preferential Procurement Act. Of course, it has gone through a lot of changes over the time. And that, the changes had to happen, but then they were introduced through the regulations, and then the Constitutional Court set the regulations aside because they were ultra vires the act. So we really needed one piece of legislation in the country that implements Section 217 of our Constitution. So now we have that. So the President has now signed the bill, which is now the Procurement Act, 28 of 2024 for South Africa, which will collapse any other regulation, practice notes, guidelines that were ever issued. And most of these things, by the way, some of them were in contravention to each other. So now at least we are able to read only one document that tells us how procurement of goods and services and infrastructure should take place in our country.
Interesting. Just for those who might have missed the gravy train, can you just maybe paint a picture for us in terms of before, how did it look like? Before we dive into what we can expect now, how did procurement look like before for the average person who's got an SME or trying to get into a business?
So in the past, Babluazi, you had to register in more than 700 databases if you wanted to do government contracts. You had to register in all the municipalities' databases for you to get an opportunity to get contracts from government. Obviously, that had changed, and the government introduced what you call a central supplier database. Now, central supplier database consolidated all the databases within government into one area, but you still had to apply through different organs of state for tenders. What the bill is now introducing, of course, is also a further consolidation of all of that. Because you can imagine if you had to ask for an RFQ, an RFP, and then you had to go to all, how many, we understand there's at least about 700 state organs only, excluding municipalities and national government. So you can imagine for suppliers, now all of things are going to be streamlined into one area. And also, if you want to know, I participated on this bid, and I want to know my results, I want to know my competition.
Yes.
Now you have an opportunity. So the bill introduces a single tender portal where all of these things needs to be consolidated into. And of course, in the past, one example, if I was not happy with a state organ, the decisions that the state organs have taken, whether a municipality or a state-owned company, I had to go through the process and ask for information through PIA. And if I was still not happy, then I have to go to the court. Now, for a lot of SMEs, they were never able to raise funds to approach the courts.
Yes.
Now the bill has introduced what you call a tribunal. Now I don't have to go and pay lawyers any money if I'm not happy with the decisions of state organs. Now at least I'll be able to go to an independent body that is not within the state organ. Because sometimes the decisions that happen within the state organ, of course, they have to toe the line, so to say, as well. Now I'll be able to go to an independent body that will be able to listen to my case, make a decision. And the beautiful thing about this tribunal is that it's going to be chaired by a retired judge. So if you like, there's a legal system for small businesses in the country, which is a very, very progressive step in the country.
I want to just stick to what were some of the disadvantages that were experienced by SMEs, let's say majority of the black SMEs, what were some of the disadvantages or stumbling blocks with the old procurement bill?
Yeah. So the previous Procurement Act, and unfortunately, state organs, because in the past they were sitting outside preferential procurement, and they could do things like set aside. So they could set aside a portion of their procurement annually and say for this commodities, categories of commodities, we are going to ring-fence them for SMEs, black-owned organization, black women organization, black youth organization. However, National Treasury in the past issued an instruction note that illegalized this process. Now you can imagine SMEs now, if they have to go toe-on-toe with either Chinese companies, even our own manufacturers. They were not protected at all through our own procurement process. So our procurement process said it's a 90-10, 80-20, whoever is the highest scoring bidder must be awarded a contract. It can be anybody, from anywhere in the world for that matter. So state organs said, look, we know these are the challenges. Right? We want to set aside certain procurement. But of course, National Treasury in those days said that was a non-compliant process. Now it's in the bill. So now, going forward, state organs, we expect them to publish commodities that they are ring-fencing for black-owned small businesses. And of course, women-owned businesses and youth-owned businesses. And also, the beautiful thing about this bill is that we are also able to protect certain sectors in certain geographies. So if, for example, I have a manufacturing capacity that I'm building in a specific area, when I go out on tender, I'll be able to ring-fence and to protect that little bit of economy. I mean, let me make an example. The vaccine story.
Yes.
You know, government invested a lot of money to manufacture vaccines in our country. But when the tender went out, it was another company that awarded the tender. So all of that investment now could not be protected because the procurement system or regulatory framework did not allow you to protect that. And of course, if you think about all other countries, they have a similar regulations, right? There are certain commodities which, especially government department, they are told that you must buy locally. So we cannot only leave on the mercy of private sector alone saying proudly SA. It must be a legislated process, which it is now.
One of the key highlights of this procurement bill is, they say, the strong support for local production and manufacturing. That brings me to another very sensitive part of which I think it would implicate mining industry. The value chain and the supply chain within mining industry. What did it look like before, and what are some of the new possibilities that can be expected with SMEs that want to go into mining, as we know that it's got an unfair rate? Can we expect any new positive changes there?
So the mining sector, obviously, you know, they have their own mining charter. Of course, that was also unfortunately set aside. Some of the aspect of the mining charter was set aside. The DTIC is working very close with the DMRE to ensure that there's some or now it's called DMR because the energy is now out of it. They are working together to align these two pieces of legislation because it does not make sense that you have conflicting regulations that tries to do exactly the same thing. So whilst government, for example, we still have mining companies that are owned by the state as well that are participating in the value chain, but those are also not protected at all. They are also left on their own demise, so they must be allowed to compete in the main with. So there was absolutely not a possibility to ring-fence and to protect some of their work or their assets or their production. So even though this Procurement Act only talks about procurement of goods and services by government and state organs, it does, and what we have seen in the past, Babulwazi, the very same previous laws that were there in procurement, we saw private sector also copying because it's best practice. using almost the very same framework for their own procurement. So we believe and we really hope and encourage a private sector as well to say that now that we have a new act, we want to see them also being members of South Africa and participating in the goodwill of South Africa, and also ensuring that they protect SMEs, they ring-fence. Remember in the mining charter, there was also that ring-fencing at the 30% for SME, for women-owned companies and all of that. So that is also now in the procurement bill. And though the percentages are not defined as yet, the procurement bill lays a framework for that. And it says that the minister, in consultation with other ministers, for example, the Ministry of Small Business, the Ministry of the DTIC, they will come together, and especially for the industry side, to develop the minimum requirement in terms of set aside for those industries to comply with transformation targets.
What are some of the implications, positive implications on supply chain professionals, who we know that, there's been a big outcry over the years, non-inclusion and so forth? What changes can they expect specifically in the supply chain profession?
Babluazi, you've really had your finger in the right place. Transformation is driven by people. Legislation, framework, yes, those things are okay, and they are very important. But you cannot exclude the drivers, people that work every single day. Public procurement is about 1 trillion budget every year. And by the way, SARS last year collected just over 2 trillion.
Wow. Half
of it goes through the procurement of goods and services. Now, if you're not going to develop these people that you are entrusting with 1 trillion rands, what type of outcomes will you expect? So we always complain about infrastructure. We had previously that recently that government, even the government of higher education, is bringing back money that they could not spend to national treasury. And always if you ask, you get told, no, it's supply chain processes. We were delayed because of the non-efficiencies of the procurement process. And of course, always is about the people. We talk about irregular expenditure. It's all about people. And if this industry is not professionalized, is not recognized as a profession, there was a process, Babulwazi, that was started by National Treasury to professionalize the industry. And from our side as a supply chain council, we are saying let us professionalize, especially for infrastructure. The way you procure infrastructure, it's not the same way as you're going to procure paper or food and all of those other things. So you need professionals that understand engineering, that understand the drivers of infrastructure, that understand the drivers of the products that are being used in infrastructure, that also understand that generally in infrastructure development you have multinationals. So how are you going to deal with these multinationals that are coming? And you can see the bulk infrastructure projects that we have so much interest from outside the country. Many organizations from Europe, from Asia are participating in our value chain. So if we do not professionalize our professions that are sitting in supply chain, unfortunately, the outcomes are just going to be worse. So the bill starts that process, and it encourages people in supply chain to be members of a professional body. So at least it is encouraging them. And also, what it will deal with also is that we see sometimes, for example, somebody in supply chain, they get caught with their hand in the wrong place. Later on, they pop up in another state.
Oh, yes.
Right? You deal with it, and then, of course, before the case is finished, they move. And then later on, 6 months down the line, is head of supply chain in another institution. So we want all of the procurement professionals to register so that we can monitor their activities. So that if they mess up, we can take the license away. And the procurement bill also talk about debarment. So we can debar not just companies. I mean, in the past, that's what we did. SMEs or generally companies that were found wanting, You could register them on the National Treasury database of defaulters and those directors and their companies, and then they won't get another opportunity. Now we can even debar individuals right, that are found wanting. Whether you're a politician or not, you can be debarred. So if suppliers are not happy, if somebody gets a call and say, hey, I can make a plan for your payment. Right? If you do a little bit of an advancement, I know you've supplied your invoice, you've supplied goods and services, but we are holding your payment, and we can help you. We want those people to be reported. Because once they are reported and the case goes through and they are found guilty, we don't want to see them ever again in supply chain. They can go and do something else. They can do gardening and all those other things, but we don't want to see them back in our profession, because they've really messed up this profession for many, many years. And that's what we hope that going forward, the bill will be able to deal with that.
I see a lot of unlocking of opportunities. I want to dive a little bit into rail. I see and I hear a little bit about rail here and there, whether it's coming back or not. We saw what happened with Richards Bay at the port. So there was no synergy between on-road freight and the port. What are your sentiments around the possibilities around rail as an economic driver? Also more specifically because rail lines run through some of the most rural places in our country. What are your sentiments around that?
So we're really hoping that there's going to be enough investment that is put to actually firstly ensure that there's infrastructure, there's availability of infrastructure, but also build new infrastructure that connects to us, to our continent. But one thing which is quite good, which is also in the bill, is that, remember we spoke about the set aside.
Yes.
So what the country can do, and through of course DTIC and the Ministry of Finance, is to ring-fence all of those commodities that are required to build this infrastructure, but also to ensure that we connect communities to participate in the maintenance and the support of that infrastructure alongside the railway line.
That's very good.
So that's the thinking that we hope that going forward, our heads of supply chain within, especially within Transnet and also within PRASA, they'll be able to think about that. Because if communities take ownership of their own assets, right, because they are going through their own communities, then they are able to participate in the maintenance. Absolutely. And especially if we are able to build the SMEs alongside the railway. And that's possible now because you can ring fence, and using the enterprise and supply development levers within the DTIC, within the BEE Act, then you are able to develop those suppliers that are able to maintain the railway over the lifespan of the railway line.
Absolutely. You know, I'm motivated just thinking about, we used to have a lot of black cooperatives, you know, especially along rural areas, and because most didn't know that it was these challenges within supply chain bill that would have maybe kept them locked out and not knowing how to penetrate the market. How would you encourage rural outlying areas? Because rural areas have got wealth within the sand and, you know, agriculture and so forth. How would you encourage those areas in terms of, for the using layman's terms, in terms of what can they look forward to now that they might have not been able to do before?
So one important step that they need to do is to really participate in the procurement processes of the institutions that are operating in their area. And now that the bill also introduced that you can ring fence products and commodities for specific areas. So they have to approach state organs and ensure that they're able to share their skills or what they have in terms of their companies that they have, or the cooperatives, as you rightly said, what they have in their area. Now, supply chain organizations are responsible to interact with them. And gone is this days that says we are going to meet when there's a tender. It cannot work like that. So the demand plans of state organs, while of course they are driven by their own mandates and their own objectives, they must also be driven by transformative agenda as well. So they must understand, because it's not sustainable. I mean, what the bill is also introducing is this sustainability, or the ESG. Because it's important that as we procure, the communities and the environment are also participatory in our processes. And of course, we follow the proper governance processes to integrate those communities. So my recommendation is that engage with those state organs. And it doesn't matter, it might be a municipality. Share your capability, your capacity that you have, and ensure that they put that into their demand plan. Because if it's not on the demand plan, then by the way, they must publish this demand plan. So they must tell the communities that this is what we'll be procuring over the next 12 months. So that information must be readily available to cooperatives and communities in that particular area. But also, they must ask, what have you set aside for this community? In the past, they could not do that. It was illegal. Now, it's a law. So now, nobody can hide and say, no, I cannot do that because it's illegal. It's in the act. So they must say, what have you ring-fenced? And we want to see that for all the state organs, all the 700 odd of them, and municipalities. We want to see what they've ring-fenced for small businesses, for black-owned organizations, for cooperatives, and for locally manufactured products. And not only that, and services, because what we have seen now is that we are now importing services quite a lot. So the bill has also introduced that not only think about production of goods, but also think about services as well. That can be localized as well. So we are really looking forward to be working together with the DTIC to ensure that those commodities are well defined and they are designated for local content.
Mr. Mampane, my second last question to you is, there are those that have enjoyed the better half of this old bill, in terms of they were the ones who were known that definitely itenda bayayithola. We've got tender entrepreneurs who are known at the exclusion of others. What does this mean for that game in terms of issues of inclusion and just to strike the balance just amongst the black SMEs?
So I strongly believe that the pie is big enough for all of us to contribute. And it cannot be ring-fenced to a minority. What we have seen in the past is that while it was encouraged, even in the previous preferential regulations, to follow an open and a transparent process, we still saw a lot of non-compliant procurement processes where people will ask for a deviation, will ask for an exemption without any specific reasons, because they wanted certain individuals to benefit. The bill now says regardless of the method of procurement, whether it was an emergency, it was a deviation, exemption, or normal procurement process, we want to see who got the contract, for what, and for how much. So that information must be public, must be made public, so that we understand who they are. So because as a supply chain, we'll also be tracking and seeing where all of these tenders are going. And if we see common thread, the beauty about this current procurement bill is that now we have an independent body that can regulate that particular space. I mean, in the past, you could see it, we talk about it in media, but what else can we do? Right? We couldn't have enough funds to go to the courts and to go and challenge the state organs or this individual. Now we have an independent body that is mandated to hear us, to hear the SMEs in the country when they say, but we notice that there are problems. So while it encourages open and transparent procurement processes, it also says regardless of the method that you are coming in, we want to see when you eventually get that particular contract, and we are going to monitor. And of course, we know those reasons. Someone comes in very low, and then there's variations, right? Initially, this thing was meant the infrastructure for 2 billion, and then that escalates to 20, 25 billion, even 30 billion. We know about all of those contracts. Now we want to monitor them on annual basis as it increases, and people can now go to the tribunal and state their case for hearing.
Wonderful. My final question to you is, bringing it back home, government of national unity, what can the private sector learn from this major breakthrough?
We are really encouraging private sector that this is a new, all those that are, whether you're participating in GNU or not, it does not matter. We have a new regulatory framework for procurement of goods and services.
Wonderful.
In the main, private sector support locally produced goods, support SMEs, and in the main, support small businesses that are owned by black people, and as the majority, that are owned by black women, that are owned by black youth. Also support the communities. So if you are operating, you are getting your products from a farm in a specific area, think about the value chains that can be created in that particular area. The bill also encourages beneficiation. That requires private sector. We do not expect government to be the one that is beneficiating everything that comes from the soil. So the bill encourages that. So if we find that, or we must create it, because we can't sit and wait. Private, especially entrepreneurs, this is a great opportunity